Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. That's so funny, isn't it? I couldn't see my toolbar to see if we had opened the door and started to let people in. If you don't know me, I'm Monique Carayol. You're most welcome joining us this afternoon. As you can imagine, we will give a few minutes just to let people come into the room, as we say. If I could ask you, if you're happy to interact with us in the chat. So just into the chat, drop your name, where you're joining us from, and if you're happy to, your role as well, because you're almost very welcome. And also, if you want to, please do share your social media handles, because I know people also like to connect and to get to know each other on these sessions as well. So just to run you through today's agenda. So first of all, just to give a little bit of context, I know that we have a lot of EDI leads and specialists in the room today, a lot of senior leaders who are focused on tackling race inequalities and inequalities more broadly. So many of you will be familiar with the RES and what it says, but I always think it's important for our colleagues who may not be working directly in that space just to give a little bit of context. Really good to see you here, Ranjit, as well. We'll then move into the main panel discussion. And as I say, we'll have time for the audience Q&A. So please do, if you've got questions that you know you've come into the room with, pop your questions into the Q&A box right now. We'll take them there. Ruby will be going through those and she'll manage the audience Q&A for you, okay? At the end, I will try and sum up. I'll repeat the takeaway action. We'll share a little bit with you about what's coming up next, and then we will close. And we aim to close dead on 4:30, okay? So Ruby, I think if we can, one more slide, I'm right, yeah. So moving on, like I said, to just giving some context to today. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Workforce Race Equality Standards, which is a set of standards that NHS trusts are asked to report on and to adhere to and to try and achieve, let's not forget that. And there are 9 indicators in there, and you're asked to report on those so that we can see what is going on at national, regional, and trust level. I'm not an NHS employee anymore. I had a 20-year career in the NHS, and I was, for the last 5 of those years, I was a director of strategy and transformation. I left the NHS because I wanted to pursue some of the work I'm doing now and why I'm here today. I am passionate about seeing boardrooms more representative of the communities and staff they serve, and that is one of the main aims of why we have the Bravery in the Boardroom movement. And just to give you that national context to show why are we focusing on that, because your stats you see here, now the RES 2022 report is due out next month. So we're almost kind of like coming to the end of this reporting year. But I still think it's important to give this context. 22.4% of staff in the NHS are from a BME background. I'm going to use the term BME because that's the term used in the report. 12.6% of board members are from a BME background. So you can see the gap there straight away. 10% of staff at an 8C or above nationally are from a BME background. In all 7 regions, there is a lower proportion of people who identify as being from a BME background compared to the proportion of BME staff, okay? If we click to the next slide, Ruby, just to bring that context into sharper focus into this region, because we are focused on a northeastern Yorkshire region today. Much lower percentage of staff from a BME background, 12%, but still seeing that gap, 8% of board members from a BME background. So seeing, yes, there is a significant lower level of BME representation in staffing in the NHS in this region, but there's still a disproportionate lower level of board members in this area as well. I think the thing that I would also say is that there's been a large increase in non-executive directors across this region, 2020 to 2021. So you can see that it's doubled. And that will be bringing up the percentage of board members. Now, you know, on the panel today, we have a wonderful range of non-executive directors. And I deliberately want to invite non-exec directors into the space as well. Not because I think that, okay, as long as we're doing well on non-execs, it's okay. It's not that at all. We need to be seeing the numbers moving in both non-executive board member roles and executive board member roles, and also in executives in voting board member roles as well. So I'm not detracting from that. But what I do know is that the non-execs that we have here with us today are big champions and advocates of driving change. They have a wealth of experience. They wear a number of different hats. And I think the influence, the power, that advocacy, that championing that they bring into their boardroom, I think is very powerful. So it's not to throw away. Actually, the role of a NED is very crucial. And I know some people in the audience are considering, careers as being a non-exec as a way of getting into the boardroom. I think it's a great way. I think you'll learn from the panel. But it's not to shy away, because as we see here, it may only be a decrease of one. But when you've got that gap in representation at board level, that one person is a lot in this situation. I'd also say, if you've got 17 executives from ethnically diverse backgrounds, that is not a lot for the number of trusts that you have across the region. You're going to have many people who are working in isolation, many people who are the only, ethnically diverse exec member in their organisation and on their board. And some of what we'll talk about today is about how that feels. So I think here in this region, it is very different to some of the other ones that we've been in so far. But actually that situation where you may be the only one, I think is more prominent than ever here. And I think the focus here is about boardrooms being representative of the staff that they serve as well. This conversation isn't only about the boardroom, so I know colleagues are here and you will tell me straight and plain, and we know this, that we're not seeing representation up and down. You go above band 5, that representation just falls off. We know that. But because we are here with our exec members and board members, I wanted to give context around that piece as well. I will ask Millie to put later on in the conversation, Millie will put the res report into the chat as well. So for anyone who doesn't have it, we'll share the link to that in the chat also. Okay, Ruby, should we take those slides down? And are you ready for me to pop the poll up? Yeah?
I am, Monique.
Thank you. So I just would like to ask everyone, if I could ask you for a couple of minutes of your time before we go into the panel, just to participate in 2 quick polls for us. One is for us to help us understand your main reason for joining today, and that helps us in planning future events. And then the second one, which will come up, is asking, just want to get a feel for your view about your senior leaders' commitment to tackling race inequality. So Ruby, are you ready to roll?
Ready. The first one should be coming up right now.
Thank you. So if I could just ask you all to I know you might want to say that you want to pick more than one, but this is asking for your main reason for attending today.
Brilliant. They're all coming in.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Just give it a little bit more time just to make sure everyone gets a chance to do it, and I'll move on to the next question.
And can you show us the result, Ruby, on this one before you move on as well? Thank you.
Absolutely.
I know from the last sessions that we've had, what's got the highest vote previously is about seeking ideas and solutions. So, wanting to hear of practice elsewhere, wanting to hear the impact of good practice or what happened and to learn from that, and wanting to connect and work with people who are maybe looking at similar areas and interventions. So thank you for letting us know. Yeah, leadership advice and development, brilliant. Okay, Ruby, shall we hit the result?
Oh, view results, share results.
Thank you. Okay, so better understanding of the barriers and challenges, fantastic, and seeking ideas and solutions. So please make sure that when we're working through, so what happens today is that I'll be asking the panel some questions, and then we'll be opening that up for Q&A, as you know. If you feel like you've got questions or comments or views that are not being picked up, and it's, relating to the main reason why you're here, please feel free to put that into the chat, because if we don't have time today, I will come back to that. We will think about that for future events as well. So if you're trying to understand, like you said, the barriers and challenges, you're not hearing enough about that in the conversation, please do feel free to pull that up in the chat. I always take Dudley's saying, this is about challenging ourselves, challenging each other, and challenging the system. So do challenge me if we're not picking up on enough what you were expecting to hear today. I like to understand that. Okay, Ruby, shall we run the next poll?
Yep, that's coming up right now.
Thank you. Okay, so like I said, just want to get a feel here about your views on your senior commitment in your organisation or in your system. Do you feel your senior leaders and managers are committed to tackling race equality? And I deliberately asked, do you feel? Because I want to know how you feel about that. And if anyone does answer yes, I'd really welcome if you're willing to share in the chat what it is they're doing or why you feel that way. You know, so what is it that's making you feel that, yeah, they are committed to it? Is it the actions they're taking? Is it the movement you're seeing? Is it how they're interacting with you and trying to genuinely understand? Really would be good to hear that. What is it that's making that difference for you? Okay, Ruby, are we ready?
Yep, we are. And I'll be sharing the results now.
Thank you. Okay, so a real split there, but just in front, 38% of you saying, yes, you do feel that. So as I said, if anyone's willing to share in the chat why you feel that is, what's making that difference? Okay, tone being set at the top, makeup of board appointments. Okay, while I said yes, not all leaders are committed. Yep, such a good point you make there, because there's something about voicing a commitment, but the thing about role modeling the behaviors. I think that's so important. Walking the talk, leading by example. Such a brilliant point. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. If anyone else wants to share, please do drop it into the chat, because Ruby will pick them up and we'll see that whilst we move into the panel conversation. Okay, right. I'm running on time, I believe. So if I could ask my panel members to join me by switching your cameras on and coming off mute, and then I will ask you to introduce yourselves as well. I'll ask Millie, I'll just ask you to do a little tech check for me so you can give me a shout separately if there's any problem with the view, but I think we'll be okay. Yeah? So if I start, I'm going to go around the screen. And if I start with Salma and just ask you to introduce yourself for me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Monique. I'm Sami Yasmin, Director of Strategy and Change and Deputy Chief Executive at South West Yorkshire Partnership NHS Foundation Trust. Delighted to be here and part of this really important conversation.
Thank you, Salma. And Salma, you know I'm going to come straight back to you. Can you also share your 2 other board roles that you have as well, please?
Yeah, and equally delighted to be part of a leading housing association in the North East, 13 Group, and I'm also an advisory board member for the Huddersfield University Business School, and delighted to be able to give back to local communities where I grew up.
Thank you, Salma. And welcome, Sue. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Monique. Good afternoon, everybody. Allow me to introduce myself. So my name is Sue Liburd and I am a non-exec director at North Lincolnshire and Gould Foundation Trust. And to preempt Monique's other question around other NED roles, I do have a non-exec director portfolio. In fact, I have 3 NHS NED roles. I am the independent chair for Lincolnshire Maternity and Neonatal Services, and I am also the deputy chair for Armed Forces, NHS England's Armed Forces Public Patient Voice Advisory Group. And amongst that also, I have a number of board positions at the University of Lincoln, University of Westminster in London, and also a couple of commercial organisations as well. So I'm very much a person with a non-exec portfolio now.
You are, and I know, can I add one? You're also one of the co-founders of Black Inclusion Week.
I am indeed.
Yeah. I don't know how you fit it all in. Honestly don't. Honestly don't. You, Mahmud and Alison, you need to tell me your secrets about how you fit it all in. But let me come to Mahmud. Good afternoon.
Hi there. Thanks, Monique. And yeah, thanks again for the invite to come along. Really important topic. So I'm Mahmud Nawaz. I'm a non-executive director at the Mid-Yorkshire Hospitals Trust. So that covers, no one knows where Mid-Yorkshire is, that covers Wakefield and North Kirklees. I work full-time in the private sector, so I work for Lloyds Banking Group. So this is all a bit of a sideline, I suppose. To Monique's point, I sort of try and cram a lot into what else I do in my sideline. So I'm a school governor at a couple of schools. I am the chair of Relate, the counselling charity for Bradford and Leeds. And I sit on the organ donation committees for both Leeds and Mid Yorkshire Hospitals Trust as well. And until quite recently, I was on the board of the British Transplant Games that came to Leeds in July of last year.
Thank you so much. So much we could dig into there. I can't wait to get into our questions. And Alison, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. I'm doing very well, thank you. Yes, my name is Alison Lowe. I'm the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime in West Yorkshire, and I'm also a NED at the Leeds Community Healthcare Trust, and we're a community trust operating in primarily Leeds, but also across the north of England. I'm also a trustee of a couple of charities, Together Women, which works with women at risk of offending. I'm a founder member of that charity. And I'm also a trustee of the Leeds Citizens Advice Bureau.
Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you. So let me jump into the questions. I'm going to come to all of you. And so for those of you who don't know, I've spoken to the panel offline and I've tried to say, okay, I'm going to try and move us through these questions. But if I could just ask you all to just what people really want to know is your journey into the boardroom. So Alison, I'm going to come to you first. And just say, if you could summarise your journey into the boardroom and your senior leadership roles, and just tell us a little bit about what helped you to get there.
Okay, so I was strangely ended up in the third sector, in the voluntary sector, after I left university. I didn't know what to do, and I saw a job as a support worker for St Anne's and ended up getting into the third sector that way. By the time I was 39, I was the chief exec of Touchstone, which is a mental health charity, and I was the chief exec for 17 years, and working in the mental health world alongside trusts. I was asked many times if I was interested in becoming a NED, and initially I actually applied to become a NED outside of Yorkshire because I was approached by a recruiter, was not successful. And then I was made aware of the chair of LCH. So I applied to be the chair, first of all, of LCH, because go big, why not go big? And was not successful, but they then asked me to apply to become a non-exec director of that trust, and I was successful. So I think being in the voluntary sector, working alongside NHS colleagues for many, many years, definitely helped me. But I think my passion for health equality and health equity, my knowledge of diversity, equality and inclusion, and my proven track record in delivering against those objectives for many, many years were all key ingredients of success.
Can I just dig in a little bit? So when you said to me you became the chief exec at 39, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that. So can I just ask a bit about that step in there, so that jump up into that role? What happened there?
So I actually became a chief exec because I was being bullied by a man in another charity that I was working at. I'd got to service director in another quite large charity. Yeah. I was being bullied by the chief exec. It took me a while to realise that I was being bullied. It was affecting my mental health. And I realised that I either stayed for him, possibly became more unwell, or leave on my own terms. So the chief exec role came up and I applied, and thank God I was successful because I wanted to take the power back. I didn't want to be bullied. I didn't want to be in a situation where I was miserable at work and where I wasn't safe. And being safe for me is really important because I have lived experience of childhood sexual abuse, domestic abuse. I can't be in an environment where I don't feel that I am physically and psychologically safe. And so that's been a driver for me in many of my choices.
Yes. Thank you, Alison. Thank you for being so honest with us as well. I appreciate it. Thank you. Salma, if I could come to you, talk to me. I mean, I know your story and journey, but there's so many bits in it. I'm warning you now, Salma, you have 3 minutes, okay?
I was going to say it's a challenge, isn't it, of being succinct, but I am really impressed that Alison was, because she's got a huge background. So I guess just to say that I kind of feel like, and I always say this, that my career journey started here in Castle Hill, a landmark in Huddersfield in Yorkshire, took me all the way to the Kingdom Tower in the Middle East and then back again to Yorkshire, a place that I have a very deep connection to. I'm a mental health nurse by background, a very proud nurse and still a registered nurse. It feels incredibly important to stay connected to the real and live issues that our frontline staff are experiencing. Worked in inpatient services, community services, the whole range of frontline services. And then in 2002, very similar to Alison really, took what now, looking back, feels like quite a brave step to leave the comfort zone of the NHS and the structures and support that that brings to go out into the voluntary and community sector. Felt like I suppose a baptism of fire for me, but during that time I think I learned an incredible amount about living with uncertainty and perhaps venturing into something which doesn't have a clear roadmap. I was employed to lead a pilot project around testing out community development approaches with different and diverse communities. And during the 3 years that I was there, became chief executive of what became a charity, and many years on still continues to be a resource within communities, and also sustained medium-term and long-term sustainability for that charity. But a real highlight for me in terms of my development, came back into the NHS, led a couple of whole system change programmes at a senior level, Yorkshire and in London. One was around delivering race equality framework and fast-tracking the implementation of that policy. And the second one was the Marie Curie Delivering Choice programme in London. Both of these issues remain really important to us even today in healthcare, and much more work to be done on them. And then went back to my passion in mental health as Deputy Director of Older Adult Services at South London and Maudsley. Incredibly important, given that they've often been underfunded services. And it was at the time that the dementia strategy was being introduced. And personally, I feel quite passionate about that area of work, having had a father who had very early onset dementia. Did that for a couple of years, and then, not like I'd gone far enough from Yorkshire, decided to venture to the Middle East. But what gave me the confidence to do that really was a brilliant chief executive who actually said to me, why don't you take a sabbatical? Stuart Bell was incredible. I bumped into him recently and he said that was an investment decision, that was. But it gave me the comfort of knowing that I could go and do something, but I could come back to my job if it didn't work out for 12 months at least. But stayed in the Middle East for 6 years as Director of Nursing and Transformation, and incredible experience working in a very different culture, but leading multinational teams and diversity. Learned a lot about inclusion during that time, and myself within a different context. Came back to the UK, took a breather for a few months and missed the NHS. And then took the opportunity of the current role that I'm in, that I've been in for 6 years, and the latter 18 months or so, I've been the Deputy Chief Executive as well. So that's kind of my career history.
Wow, 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 wow. There's so much in there. And you still didn't tell us about your 2 NED roles and board advisor roles, but I'll let you off. But I think really what struck me there, Salma, is what you said about, you are still a registered mental health nurse, and that importance of you being able to connect and to be able to see through that lens for the front line, even though you're in the boardroom, yes, but having that connection back, especially to clinical colleagues, is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, incredibly important, I think. And that's where most of the work happens. And that's where the best ideas are for change and improvement.
For sure. Thank you. Mahmud, can I come to you now? And especially what I know I'm being cheeky, isn't it? Because I'm kind of saying this is what I want. But I want to hear as well what I know I've had the pleasure of speaking to you separately about the work you champion around organ donation as well. But let me be quiet and let you share your story and journey into the project.
Try and weave it in. So I guess my journey, a lot of people ask about how you plan your career and how you go from A to B in a very structured way. And I don't think that's happened for me at all. I think I've had a journey which has been built really on chance and circumstance. Really, so probably not the best role model in terms of how to plan, but here goes. So I graduated in 1991, and for any of you economic historians will know that was a pretty bad recession in 1991. So I graduated from Cambridge University in 1991, went to all the milk round interviews, so all the employers coming and trying to pick off people and get them to join. Not one of those big blue chip companies wanted to offer a role in 1991. Everything was stopped. So I got a role, but deferred till 1992. So I had to then, with KPMG, so I was going to be an auditor, trained to be an auditor. And I had to find something to do for a year, basically, in that deferred year. So I ended up in, of all places, I was living in London. You can probably tell I'm not a natural Yorkshire person, but I ended up in the House of Commons, in the House of Commons library, for what was meant to be a 6-month job. And I have to say, it's the most fantastic 6 months of working somewhere really, really special. I really enjoyed it. And instead of then stopping in 6 months and traveling for 6 months, then going on to do the KPMG thing, I really loved it and I wanted to stay. So I ended up staying there for 4 years. I moved from there because you don't leave, you stay for life. I moved from there to work for an economic consulting firm. And I did that for a few years, and I rose up the ranks and to become director of strategy there, and ultimately the interim CEO. We ran into a bit of financial difficulty, and all the executive directors basically ran off to Australia, and it was left to me to run it for a while whilst we went through, including administration. Otherwise, the whole thing would have folded, and that's an incredible amount of pressure. I learned an awful lot about corporate governance in a very short space of time. Did a very good job, so the bank loved me, but it was stressful. It was very stressful, and learning about people's genuine livelihoods that depended on these roles and what you had to do to keep that thing going was a harsh lesson. I ended up joining another economic consultancy after that, and in the middle of that period, my then wife's father had a stroke, and he had his stroke in Bradford, and so we ended up moving from London to Yorkshire because we're going up there every weekend. It was our plan to move there, so we ended up moving. So what I ended up having to do was basically leave my life in London behind and work for myself for a year, which was the most lucrative year I had, working as a self-employed consultant. But it was a bit lumpy, paying the old mortgage when you don't know when the next paycheck's coming from. It was a bit interesting on the stress levels. So I ended up doing that for a year, and then wanted a proper job, so I ended up talking to Asda and to Halifax Bank of Scotland, and ended up with Halifax Bank of Scotland. And I've been with HBOS and now Lloyds Banking Group for the last 20 years, actually. Sadly, my wife died in 2004. So about a year or so, a year and a bit after we had moved up to Yorkshire. We got married in 2002. So had one wedding anniversary, unfortunately, but one thing I did know about her was that she wants to be an organ donor, and she died from a brain hemorrhage at Bradford Royal Infirmary, was where she got taken after she collapsed in the shower, and she went on to save 4 lives, including a little boy of 1 who wouldn't have made it to 2 without part of her liver. What I saw at Bradford Royal Infirmary in terms of the care, albeit it wasn't a good outcome for me, I saw we were there for 36 hours, and I saw the most incredible compassionate care. As a hard-nosed private sector person, I thought the NHS was about you would treat patients like we treat widgets in a manufacturing company, that you're divorced from the human emotion of otherwise how could you cope? And I saw far from it. I saw genuine emotion. I found people brushing my wife's hair when she was being kept alive through life support, when they forced me to go and eat something. And these little moments stayed with me, and it really changed my outlook on the NHS. And that's what fueled my desire to then get involved with other things. So I've been involved in organ donation, as you say. I'm on the organ donation committee in 2 trusts, Mid Yorkshire and Leeds, and I'm an ambassador for NHS Blood and Transplant as well. That connection to Mid Yorkshire through the organ donation committee and my passion for the NHS then connected me with the chair of the trust, who invited me to apply to become a non-executive director. When I got interviewed, becoming a NED, I think, is quite hard. To become a NED, you need to be a NED. I think that's basically the rule. If you've got experience being a NED, then you can be a NED. If you don't have experience being a NED, then you need experience first. So I kind of got into that cycle with the recruiter, who loved me, the trust loved me, and they said, oh, not yet, spend a year becoming, as an associate NED, we'll sort of break you up and then you'll be ready. That didn't happen. They basically then invited me for a final interview and said, yep, you're in. So I don't know how not enough experience, and then 2 weeks later, I'm experienced enough happened. But anyway, I'm grateful. So I've managed to become a NED, and I'm into my 3rd year of being a non-executive now. I wanted to build my chairing skills as well, and actually be a bit more involved in the charitable sector. So I've ended up becoming chair of Relate for Bradford and Leeds as well. So through my journey of bereavement counselling, I remarried to another widow, now divorced. That's another story. And gained step family. So having that family counselling, something I've experienced before. So I've had quite a journey of being involved in experiencing counselling, and it's something I really wanted to give back to, given my, and it gave me an opportunity to learn a chair as well. So that's how I became chair of Relate for Bradford and Leeds. And I have to say, I think one of the best bits of development in myself was becoming a school governor. It's a really good way. I've been a school governor for 5-6 years now, and it's been a really good way to learn some of the board skills, different scale, some of the board skills that you need as well. So that's kind of broadly my journey, and hopefully you get what I mean by it's circumstance and chance. Not a lot of that I planned, but actually I've used my lived experience, which is for me quite authentic, and I'm involved in things that I'm passionate about, and I think that's what makes the difference.
Yes, definitely. Oh my goodness, you know, you say it so easily, circumstance and chance, and I understand what you mean theoretically, but practically through those challenging situations that you've been through, to then to make that decision, to then say, actually, I'm going to champion, I'm going to use this for good, I'm going to give back, I want to do something in this space, and I want to do it at a leadership level. My goodness me, that's massive. That's massive. So you say it very simply, but actually so inspiring. And thank you as well for being honest. I know that's touched people emotionally, but I think it's important that we understand why you do what you do. Not just that you're doing it and you're good at it, but why, what drives you. So thank you so much. So Sue, last but not least, with your many hats that you wear, tell us a bit about your journey, please.
Yes. So my journey started off with a career in nursing. I trained as a general nurse. I then specialised in mental health, and then in maternity. I was very interested, obviously, in psychology and people and behaviours. And particularly around trauma and loss. They were areas that absolutely fascinated me. So that has kind of guided a lot of the work that I do, funnily enough. So I stayed in the NHS, but I started to get quite restless, and I was a junior ward manager, and I was just thinking, you know what, I'm incredibly ambitious, and if I just stay here in the NHS, it's not going to happen for me, not at the pace of which I wanted my career to move. And so I took the decision to join the armed forces. So I took a commission and I joined the British Army. Now, it may sound a little bit random, but I did grow up in the military. My father was in the RAF. My brother served in the Royal Navy, so I'm from a military background, so it's not quite as random. So it's a natural place for me to go and have a look. But I have to say, I joined the army by virtue of the fact that I made a decision. There hadn't been a Liburd in the army. There was Liburds in, the armed forces, and there was Liburds in, like I say, in the Royal Navy, but not in the army. And that kind of speaks slightly to the nature of my personality. So, you're going to do this, and you're expected to do that. Well, no, I'll just do a slight right turn. So it's like, yeah, okay. Notwithstanding, lots of family pressure going, what the heck, the army, that's just cannon fodder, really. So, had a fabulous time in the army. I served for 7 years. Short Service Commission, and it was at the point I left because the Armed Forces said, look, you must know basically if you like us by now, and therefore we want you to commit to another 16 years. And I went, that's not happening. You know, people don't get that as a life sentence. No, not happening. I'm loving what I'm doing. And the chances are they're lost, because if they'd allowed me just to keep nibbling up by 2 or 3 years, the chances are they'd have got that time. But that was just too big a step, you know. And I recognised it wasn't going to keep me in champagne and shoes. So I needed to do something else. So on leaving the Armed Forces, I then went into the charity sector, worked for a couple of very large charities, and the interesting piece for me, that's where some of my board experience really started to develop. So obviously as a senior leader, head of, you know, departments and teams and divisions, I was spending a lot of time in board positions, you know, board meetings, presenting, you know, leading initiative, making the business case, all of that. And I recognised that one of the places I wanted to hang out in was the board. And so I made a point of, I don't do things linearly, I have to say. I have lots of things running concurrently. And so I made sure then that I built my board skills as a trustee in smaller charities. So working as a head of in, you know, big charities, then I would be volunteering as a trustee. So honing my skills. So on, but you know, champagne and shoes, inverted commas, you know, that lifestyle bit calling. But also I felt as though I kind of mastered a lot of the skills. And so I realised I hadn't had any commercial experience. My whole career at this point, you know, had been very public sector driven. I wanted some commercial experience. And so I started to apply for some roles. I got particularly headhunted for a corporate office interiors PLC, global international brand. And I went in as the head of employee development, director of OD. And it was quite an interesting experience. And one of the reasons I'm sharing this with you is that, so I arrived in post. 2 months later, the new HR director arrived in post. And within 3 weeks, they sacked the HR director. She just was temperamentally unsuitable as far as they were concerned for their organisation. And the chief exec of the company came and said, look, Sue, would you like the HR director role? You know, this is a main board position. We've seen what you can do. You clearly you've got the skill set. You've got the knowledge. You know, would you come and join the board? And I remember the internal narrative, that voice, you know, the little shoulder going, I'm not ready. You know, I'm not ready to, you know, yeah, I've got enough bits of paper. I've got the qualifications. Yes, I've got some diverse experience. Yes, I'm, you know, I believe I was a successful leader, but am I ready for a large international commercial organisation to be an HR director? I took a deep breath in, let it out slowly and went, yes. And it was I'll think about it on the way home, but it was in that moment it was like, you know, I need to say yes, because, you know, opportunity, you know, just comes ever so often, and that was an opportunity where I recognized in that moment I need to say yes and shut up my, you know, my inner critic. So that was a profound experience, I have to say, and I went on to be business development director, moved out of just HR, and then I got the taste for some consultancy work. So I've worked with some of the large consulting firms, as well as setting up my own commercial and international change and transformation consultancy. But all the time, running alongside, I've been sitting on other boards. So starting to develop my non-exec portfolio, sitting as a trustee, some commercial. I'm interested in fast-growing SMEs, typically the 2 million to 10 million. I love that. They've got through all of the pain, they're ready to grow, they've got enough resource, and then taking them beyond that, you know, that 10 million, 20 million, 70 million. And I love that. But as the years were going on, so I was getting to that point whereby, you know, my roots still keep calling, you know, and I just felt that, you know, something, I think I'm ready to return to the NHS and see if I can help. Because, of course, you'd just be hearing all of these stories and still having friends and colleagues and family that's still working in the NHS. And I thought, can I bring my skills? And so I wanted to develop my non-exec portfolio within the NHS as well as within the commercial space. And So hence where I've arrived today, with a number of, as I say, non-exec roles within the NHS, and hopefully, you know, making some kind of meaningful contribution in terms of how we shape the NHS nationally, but also I'm very, very passionate about, obviously, my region, yeah, because there's something for me about this is where I live.
Yes.
These are where my friends are. I've got family members, and I want the, you know, the best possible service for them. So how can I do that, and how can I use my skills? And it's sitting at boards and supporting the executives well and truly, not just holding them to account, but supporting them. Really important for me. So
thank you. And I'm hearing that from all of you as well about that local connection. You know, that local connection to want to drive change in that way. And I can see Jug saying it's great for him to have you as a NED at his organisation. I can see that in the chat as well. I'm going to mix the questions up a bit. So I'm warning you, panel, okay? Because I'm mixing them up a little bit. I want to just connect some dots on what I've heard there as well. So Alison, I want to come to you because you spoke about the reason why you were approached initially to apply for a NED role was because you were known for your championing of the things that you were passionate about. Can you tell me a little bit about how you're using your power and influence in the boardroom at Leeds community to help tackle inequality? Because I know it's something that you are very passionate about.
I'm very passionate about it, and obviously I use that passion, but I try to also use my influencing and negotiating skills, because some of this stuff is really hard to hear. A lot of the white senior people in organisations that feel like it's personal and that we're having a go at them as individuals, and sometimes, let's be honest, we are. But in order to effect the change, we need to create that psychological contract with those individuals so that they can be allies, they can be part of the solution. So, you know, yes, sometimes there might be a hammer coming down, but you know, it's wrapped in velvet because we need to achieve our objectives. I have to say that people are a bit scared of me. They're a bit scared of me because I tell the truth. I use honesty. I use the fact that actually I've probably got ADHD. Quite a lot of my family members have been diagnosed. We're all very similar. So I can't tell a lie. I have to be honest. I have to tell the truth. And it's my values. I can't look myself in the mirror on a morning if I've not lived my values every day. And if I see something happening that's not okay, I am really vocal and I will have those conversations, but I'll try to do it in a compassionate way. I'll try to do it in a fair way, and I'll try to do it in a way that helps that person to take responsibility but not feel blamed, because the blame game does not achieve the objectives that we want. So, but I'll also be tactical. I've been a politician. I didn't tell you that. I've been a councillor for 29 years. I'm no longer a councillor, but of course I'm in a political role now as deputy mayor. And you learn how to be political with a small p within the boardroom, and how you need to utilise your allies, work out beforehand. So I'll often have conversations before I've even got into the boardroom with key people to get us where we need to get to. Your chair is a key ally. If you don't get on with your chair, things will be very difficult. It's not impossible, but they will be difficult. So do try to work effectively with your chair, because they can be the difference between those big changes happening or no change happening. But also you need to be open and honest about where you're coming from, why you need this change to happen, not personalise it, passionalise it. You know, it's about your passion, it's about your love for your fellow man and women. I want everybody. I want to live in a world where everyone's happy. I can't bear to live in a world where everyone's miserable. And so I strive for that for everybody. And I try and bring that belief system into the boardroom. And I hope that despite the bit of fear that I know exists, there's also a lot of respect for how I'm trying to effect that change.
Yeah. And you know what? That little bit of fear might be good. You know, that little bit of fear might be good.
It's never done me any harm. It's never done me any harm. Even
I love what you said. I love what you said there about bringing down the hammer but wrapping it in velvet, right? I really heard what you said there, because you'll see from the chat, Alison, if you're looking at it, you'll see that people are saying, we need change. This needs to change. We need to challenge things in a different way. And I think the very clear advice that you've given there is saying about how to drive and push and challenge, but as you say, but know how to maneuver that firmly, but appropriately. Love that. Love that. Thank you so much. And if I could come to you, Mahmud, because I know for you as well, like you said, what brought you into the boardroom? What brought you into wanting to make a difference in the NHS in particular? How are you using your power and influence at Mid Yorkshire to help tackle and keep a focus on inequalities, tackling inequalities?
Yeah, thanks, Monique. So it is difficult. I'm the only, well, was the only person of colour on the board, exec or non-exec, at Mid Yorkshire when I joined. So I was very passionate and keen to explore the EDI challenges from a staff perspective. And I have to say as well, coming from outside in the private sector into the NHS, being quite shocked at reading res reports and just realising it just felt like a different world. It didn't feel like what I was used to in a bank. You know, if you exhibit those kinds of behaviours in the private sector, you don't work in the company anymore, full stop. To not see that same kind of sanction really applying in the NHS really blew my mind. So I've spent a lot of time. Look, we all come with a lens, right? We all have a certain way of viewing things, and I think, and I'm sure my panel members would agree for themselves, and I'm sure most of the people on this webinar as well would agree, that we are probably very attuned to seeing issues in how they appear in reportable issues logs or within the data, and we're very quick to ask the right questions or the awkward questions within boards. So I've definitely been doing that. It's not easy, but to add to what Alison said, absolutely what you do outside of the board really matters. And I've tried to be a very strong ally to our internal EDI team. So they come and talk to me before they come to board. And I talk to them after they've been to board, so we can help to move the agenda along. And that makes a massive difference, I think, to have this agenda championed. I'm not the EDI champion as an ed.
Okay. Yeah.
It's and I think this is actually quite healthy. It's a white man who is championing our EDI agenda. That actually frees me to be the agitator. You know, and as a pair, I think we work quite well. There's loads of work to do in Mid Yorkshire, don't get me wrong, but I think it works quite well. I mean, on a health inequalities perspective, I mean, why have I become an ed? It's a passion for health inequality and tackling health inequalities. And I think what I love in West Yorkshire in particular for our integrated care system, I can see, I know Karen's on the webinar, so it's a good plug. So you know, West Yorkshire ICS, and indeed for the two places that Mid Yorkshire covers, Wakefield and Kirklees, tackling health inequalities is a really big thing. It's a really big area of focus. My honest view is I think Mid Yorkshire is still in its infancy. So I have been quite vocal, not just raising the need to have board time on health inequalities, but also to ensure we're in the middle of rewriting our strategy for the next 5 years. How we integrate tackling health inequalities centrally into that strategy is again something I sit on the strategy committee for the trusts. Is something that I've been very, very vocal about. And I guess, you know, we talked about organ donation originally. It's a massive area of inequality. I mean, if you're from an ethnic minority, you're twice as likely to be on the waiting list for a transplant, and you're half as likely to be a deceased donor.
Yes. Which
means, guess what? You wait a lot longer and you have a much stronger risk of dying. And focusing on that with my lived experience as well, and championing the need to tackle advocacy amongst ethnic minority communities has been a really important part of what I've done, and brought that into Mid Yorkshire and onto the Mid Yorkshire board. So I'm very proud that the entire board have got behind this as well, and supported the championing of this. And also with my counselling hat on, you know, relate. I think I've seen a couple of comments in the chat. You don't get much penetration of services like this into ethnic minority communities, and breaking down those barriers. But I'm doing this in Bradford. You know, breaking down those barriers is really important. So we have a very diverse client base, but it could be better. It could be more diverse, and engaging with GPs who don't necessarily have a strong view of the role of counselling as well, to kind of deal with their barriers as well before you even get to the patient barriers. These are all real challenges to deal with. And I'm very proud that having that voice and having that influence around the board table, and sometimes it's about you saying, and sometimes it's about you getting other people to say on the board table the things that need to be said. And to Alison's point, with the small p, the politics around this, the engagement before, during, and after, really, really powerful to help get the agenda seen in the right way.
Thank you, Mahmud. And I think there's some real important lessons you shared there, you and Alison, as you said, about some of the conversation I like to come out in here as well is about helping people to understand how to be in a state of readiness. We have colleagues here who are aspiring directors, and they want to get into the boardroom. And we know that there's something about your technical ability and your experience, of course, but we all know being in that state of readiness, understanding how to navigate when you get into that boardroom, understanding how that may feel very different when you are the only one. It's really tricky. So I think both of you have shared some real nuggets that I hope people are picking up on about what you do and how you do it. So thank you for that. So Salma, I'm going to come to you because you've had a varied journey, and I want to just ask you, I'm going to ask you a double question in terms of what helped you on your journey. So if you could just share a couple of tips with us, what helped you on your journey, but what were some of the challenges as well?
So I think the thing that probably helped me to stick with the journey, even at tough times, was over the years, I think really crystallising what's important to me and my purpose, why I do what I do, which goes back to my values. I think Alison talked about that earlier. So I think if I was saying to it, giving a tip to anybody or a key message or takeaway, it would be really understand what your purpose is and what difference you want to make, and really hold on to that when it's tough. I think the other things that really helped was just thinking about a network and developing that and nurturing that over the years. It's become more and more important to me, I think, as I've developed into a more senior role or taken on more challenging roles. I think nurturing your networks, having safe spaces where you can go and talk to about some of the challenges, or perhaps people that are honest enough to hold up the mirror and kind of challenge you in terms of your own thinking, because we can all get in our own way, can't we? Mahmud talked about this earlier, we've got our own lens, but our lens sometimes might come to the forefront when that might not be the issue. So I think that's really important. I think the other thing is, and Sue talked about this, silencing your internal critic. And, I would say that I probably am my greatest critic. And I think silencing that and having real belief in yourself, I think sometimes, and shed loads of it, the more responsibility you take. But I think your networks can help you to hold on to that when it's tough is incredibly important. I think courage to step up. And I know that when I've been taking on a new role, if I'm absolutely honest, the word, and people in my network know this because I will often say, I've said this to you not that long ago, Monique, I felt absolutely terrified sometimes stepping into a new role. And you can't remember what it was that got you there for the first 6 months at least until you find your feet again. But I think being brave and really overcoming your fear, because actually once you step in, the final point I'd say is know the job, you've got to deliver. And I think in every job, that's where my confidence has come from. It's being really good at doing what you're doing, but at the same time, making sure that you're silencing your internal critic. Yeah, so I think they're some of the things that helped me along the way. Good coaches and mentors are essential. And then finally, I will say this, it's always been really helpful when I've had a fantastic boss or leader that's believed in it. I think that always helps. And I've been fortunate enough to have some of them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Salma. And again, being really honest, we're seeing you now as a deputy CEO, and I know you're going to be one of the first Muslim women CEOs in the NHS. I'm very confident about that, very, very confident about that, because I know your talent, I know what you bring, and I know what you deliver. And I think that's what you said there as well. Yes, there is about talent, but actually do your job and do a good job. And I mean, it's easy to just kind of navigate everything what we're saying here, but forgetting actually there's a point here about delivering. But you being honest, even though you're a deputy CEO, that you still have that inner critic, you still have those fears to overcome as well. I really respect and appreciate you sharing that with us. Sue, I want to pick up a question with you, if I may, because as I mentioned, you're co-founder of Black Inclusion Week. So I know that you are very passionate and very passionate about seeing spaces where we celebrate difference, where we celebrate the talent that we have, and that we shine a light like we are here today on some of the things we're talking about. But it would be really helpful for you to share with us, sounds like a really obvious question, but people struggle with this in terms of being able to, why is this important? So my question is, what difference does it make to have a diversified board? Why do we need that?
It's a really interesting question, and it's, on one hand, it seems obvious, and I know this is a bit of a cliche term because, people, morally, in terms of human rights, then, that's where it should be at. Of course we should, if we're all humans and we're valued, then obviously, then it makes sense. And then we do the whole piece around, well, actually, shouldn't we have decision makers who are reflective of the communities that we're serving? So whether that's commercial or whether that's, public sector, yeah? So all of that seems obvious. And I've got to say, a good 15 years ago, I was going, look, the reason we're not moving the dial on this is because we haven't got a business case. And actually what speaks to really organisational change, what are the real drivers? Obviously, we've got a legislation piece. Well, we've got some of the most robust legislation in the world. And guess what? We've still got a problem. So I've just got, right, it's got to be about the business case. So I was one of those champions of the business case where we've got the evidence. We now have mountains of evidence that shows that diverse boards outperform those boards that aren't. We've got the evidence. So I'm now doing that. So why isn't it moving then still at pace? Because we've got all the evidence, business case, moral case, so we've got that. We've got the legislation. Why? And I think for me, it's a wicked problem we're trying to solve. It's not as simple as having just enough of the evidence or just having the right intention. There is an intention-action gap without a doubt. But I think it is, there's tradition, there's the way we do things around here, there's the internal narratives. And so, and organisations, leaders of organisations, feeling as though we just need to treat this as it's a simple problem and let's just do what I call representation. So they chase the representation. So what we've got is the tick box, and we use protected characteristics as a tick box. Well, actually, that for me obviously is incredibly, faulty thinking. To manage and to lead diverse boards isn't easy because we've got people with different backgrounds, different personalities, different agendas, different worldviews, different, drivers, different experience, all coming together that need, like an orchestra, need to be conducted well. And I think we've got some poor standards across chairmanship and chairing across the UK. Professionally, I think also within the public sector, third sector, as well as within the NHS. I think we need better chairing. The chair is absolutely key in terms of being able to get a diverse board that can absolutely knock the game out the park, get the innovation, hit the targets, deliver the right quality of service consistently. And I think there's something about the quality of the chairing that we have for me.
Thank you. Hard-hitting truth there, some hard-hitting truth there. But you hit the nail on the head, and I can see people in the chat saying as well, we absolutely need to bring the conversation up because we may feel clear that, like you said, it's not just about representation by sight. It's about actually leading inclusively, isn't it? And leading and driving that change. So from what I hear here, I heard Mahmud say it. Sue, I'm pointing at you. Alison, I'm looking at you as well. I'm looking for you all to be stepping up into chair roles then. Because honestly, in what you've just said there, Sue, which I totally understand and agree with, we need to see leaders like yourselves in those chair roles, to help drive the change that we're talking about. It's not saying that from your NED role, you don't have some influence, but I hear you. And I know we've got Jag here as well. So Jagtar Singh is the chair of Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust. And he's saying here, spot on, the role of the chairs as the leader that drive and take responsibility. So I'm putting that challenge out to you guys, you know, and I think everyone on the conversation today would back us 100% about we want to see you. You know, you're inspiring us with what you're sharing. You're speaking up in the boardroom and you understand it from a broader perspective about inclusive leadership and how to really get under the skin to tackle inequalities. And I think that's what people want to see as moving the dial forward. You know, the first steps are not necessarily the wrong steps. That's not what I'm hearing from you all. But actually, if we want to drive and sustain change and really see, genuinely see equal opportunities for all in terms of their career and leadership progression, equal access to, and fair access to care and support for our communities. If we really want to see that, then what I'm hearing from you is we need strong, inclusive, consistent leadership at the very top. So thank you. It's a very powerful point that you made there. Thank you very much, Sue. So connecting to that, I want to come back to you, Salma, a moment and ask you, okay, we're looking at, I've asked Sue the question from the top, looking at it from the board level and looking out, if I said it that way. But if I ask you the question about the pipelines and our talent pipelines, and I know, Salma, one of the things you are extremely well known for is holding the ladder out and helping others to progress their careers. What do you think from your perspective should be prioritized in terms of developing and increasing and supporting diverse talent pipelines?
I think this is a really important question, Monique, and it's at the heart of, I think, changing and turning that dial. For me, I think it has to start from the beginning. So it's about recruitment, it's about onboarding, and actually there's no point in recruiting and onboarding a whole diverse range of people if we haven't got the culture or the conditions right to enable them to thrive and to bring their whole selves to work. So I think that ambition to make sure that the NHS is a great place to work is incredibly important, and one that needs continued leadership at every level of the organisation. I think we talk about inclusive leadership. I think when you're at board level, there should be no other way of doing leadership. It has to be inclusive leadership. And I think you know, board members like myself and non-exec directors and chairs should be held to account for that. Both by, I think, you know, the governing bodies, but also I think, you know, much more widely than that. And I think celebrated and rewarded for that, because I think actually it's inclusive leadership that drives performance, that drives productivity, that drives outcomes for service users and carers. So I think that the other things that we have to do is create spaces in organisations to continue courageous conversations so that we all feel comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think that has to start obviously at the board level, and because we set the tone. I think we've heard that several times here in this conversation. But I think it's also about building the confidence of leaders at every level, particularly that middle level of an organisation where I think, you know, they've got a challenging role, have the leaders in the middle. They've got all the stuff coming down from board and they've got all the stuff coming up from staff. But I think creating brave, bold leaders at that level is incredibly important. But even more important that that level is diverse, and I think that that's incredibly important. I think the other thing around talent pipelines, having robust talent management processes which are shaped by lived experience of diverse groups of people. And I have to say that, you know, we're quite privileged in West Yorkshire, certainly, that we're working as part of an integrated care system where I think bold and brave conversations are happening on an ongoing basis. And only yesterday, the whole ICB and system leadership executive team had a conversation, again, revisiting some of the issues that we all need to feel that we're challenging ourselves around. But equally, I think that what's really important is role models and role models being accessible. Now, many years ago, I used to think, oh gosh, I'm the only one here. That would hinder my confidence, if I'm absolutely honest. I think when I heard this from somebody else, I don't profess to own it, but I heard somebody say, change it from saying the only one to the first one. And actually, that's incredibly empowering. And I really hold on to that now. And I think that there is something about shifting our mindsets, no matter where we are in the system, that actually you can do this. Now we say if Salma can do this from Yorkshire, anybody can do this. So there is a way around, but making sure that there's stretch opportunities that are followed by real jobs. So I think commitment's not enough. I think stretch opportunities is not enough. I think it's followed by real jobs. It's commitment to action, and holding ourselves to account in organisations at every level. I think, appraisals, the appraisals are incredibly important, making sure that they're meaningful for people and you're having a genuine conversation. And actually own your own appraisal is what I'd say to you. I mean, I've often, you know, and certainly it was through coaching that I learned that I didn't have to just get feedback from people that were in my immediate environment. If I was doing a huge amount of partnership work, I started to ask partners for feedback, both about what I'm doing well and what's good, but also what I need to do more of, and bringing that in. So I think own your own appraisal journey is incredibly important. So I think robust processes, but accountability, and I think I see this as an ongoing journey, but a genuine journey which is focused on action, but driven by commitment at every level.
Thank you, Salma. And I think, you know, there's some, as we're having the conversation here, I can see as well, there's some really powerful and insightful statements and comments being made in the chat. Hashim, I love what you're saying and bringing up here, and you're right, I agree with you. Inclusive leadership is a term that's bounced around, and actually I think it's really important for people to express what would that feel like for you? You know, if you felt your organization was inclusively led or was more inclusive, what would that feel and look like for you? And that organizations ask their staff and teams, what would that be? So you start to understand what it is you then are trying to achieve, and therefore what you measure. And I always think when we are speaking about this is about how people feel and how things are perceived. And it's important that we ask those questions when we survey our staff, or we ask them, how do things feel? I think is really important to get into that. But thank you so much for the comments in the chat. I've got 2 more questions. So I'm going to try and whiz this round before I go over to Ruby. So Alison, I want to come to you for some short and sharp advice. You spoke to us about why you have to be honest, your values, where that stems from and comes from. And you can see in the chat, people are admiring your bravery. But short and sharp, what advice would you give to someone who doesn't feel brave enough to speak up or to challenge discrimination that they're witnessing?
I suppose my advice would be, then why are you here? You know, you've got to live with yourself. And what is the purpose of us as Black leaders, as Black people on this planet, if we're not going to stand up for ourselves first and foremost, stand up for our families, our communities, other people who look like us? Because if we can't do that, what is the point? And when you're feeling, I'm not judging anyone who feels frightened. I feel frightened. When I first started challenging people, I used to, you know, be really terrified and think, oh, just collude, just keep your gob shut. But the colluding made me unwell. It made me something that I didn't want to be, that I didn't like. So my call to you is, please, 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 think about the person that you really are, that you deserve to be, that everyone deserves to see. Be that person, because if you be somebody else, because you don't want to upset those people out there who don't look like you, and some of them don't really care about you, then you'll never forgive yourself and you'll never be the person that you were always meant to be.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you. Clear, straight talking advice. Thank you. Yep, it's true, Janet. If we stand for anything, we will fall for anything. And I think it's another reason why I bring us together. And it's another reason why I talk about we're building a movement, because you will feel scared on your own many a time, but it's here. I want to bring people together so that you do feel like there's energy here, that you do feel like we can almost, I feel like I fly under your cover, Alison. Do you know what I mean? I feel like that, you know, you're hearing how brave Alison is and what she's talking about. I hope for some people here, when you feel like I haven't had the bravery to speak up, that you feel some encouragement and support from some of the conversations you hear here, and also that you reach out and connect to some of the people that you might be meeting in the chat. And I know for our panel, as I said, we'll ask to share their social media handles, but I know the panel will accept people reaching out to them. And I also know they speak on many other platforms as well. And I can see them nodding. Yeah, so if you're on your own, if you're feeling helpless, if you're feeling extremely oppressed where you are, know that there are people who want you to win, you know, and know that there are people who want to support you to challenge as well. So I'm going to come to the last question, and my panel guests, you in less than 1 minute each. I want you to, what is the key advice that you would give to anyone in our audience today who is an aspiring board member or an aspiring exec? What is that key bit of information that you would give them? Sue, I'm going to come to you first.
1 minute. Does that mean I just have to
talk? Less than 1 minute.
Less than 1 minute. Okay. I want to remind everybody about the 70-20-10 rule. If you've not come across it, I want you to put it to the forefront of your mind. One of the things as ethnic minorities in particular, we chase qualifications. We think that if we get the badges, then somehow we're going to be credible. The reality is, okay, that to get some of these opportunities, you know, whether it's an exec opportunity, a board opportunity, a NED opportunity, is experience counts. So seek challenging experiences, because those experiences will give us confidence to then apply and be in the room and to hold others to account. So build your confidence through experience. 70% of, you know, getting to that next stage of leadership, whatever that is 70% is predicated on experience. 20% is on having critical relationships. You need to build a power team. You need to have a mentor. You need to have few people around that you feel really safe with, where you can just go with your, oh my gosh, you know, and then it's the 10% is the rest of the qualification stuff. Yeah, it's important that you're part of, you know, you're professionally up to date and you're competent, all of that. But 70, 20, 10 is what I would encourage everybody to remember.
Thank you, Sue. Mahmud, less than 1 minute. Key advice.
I'd echo that. And maybe actually what I'm about to say kind of fits quite nicely. So I have three things. Firstly, find your passion. Find the thing that will give you that authenticity, because I think you can't fake that, obviously, and it does stand you apart. Second thing, leverage your lived experience into something positive for change. I think again that will put you on a path which is very hard to replicate. It makes you a bit special. And then the final one, which I think ties with what Sue was saying, is invest in yourself to get there. And what do I mean by that? You know, shadow people. Network like mad. I think there's a couple of really good networks. So I know Jag has already put in the chat about joining APNA for if you're South Asian. I'd really recommend everyone to do that. I found a lot of value as a non-executive being part of that group, and ditto for the CCOL group as well, which is for Black and Asian and minority ethnic non-executive directors and aspiring non-executive directors. So ccolgroup.com if you want to find out more and get in touch with Jag about APNA. Highly recommend it. Become a school governor. Build your board experience by doing things like that, or a charity trustee. I think these are all really good, powerful ways where you can build experience, to Sue's point, around being on the board. And that is really hard to replicate. If you can bring your passion, your lived experience, your authenticity, and that experience that you've built up, I think it's very, very hard to fail to be successful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Alison, I'm coming to you. You're less than 1 minute. What's that key advice you want to give to an aspiring exec or board member?
I think three things. Love yourself. If you don't love yourself, nobody else is going to love you. Give yourself permission to be happy. You don't have to be miserable if you're working in a place where you're not safe. Leave. Find somewhere that's going to love you like you love yourself. It can happen. It will happen if you believe. And finally, recognise your wider experience. If you're at home looking after children and you think, oh, I can't do that job, well, just think, if you're looking after kids, you're great at delegation, you're great at prioritisation, you're great at budgeting, you're great at multitasking. Use that lived experience to fill in that application form. If you can do it at home, you can do it in the workplace. Believe.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you so much. And Salma, last but not least, less than 1 minute. What do you want to tell us?
I might say ditto, but I think what colleagues have said, I think fundamentally believe in yourself, silence that inner critic, and invest in yourself. And I think by investing, I mean really own your career journey. If you're unhappy where you are, get out. The world's your oyster. And I think really crystallise what matters to you and what your values are, and let that drive you in terms of where your next steps might be. And if your next steps feel a bit scary, that's a good thing. That's probably the right role for you, is what I'd say to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Salma. So Ruby, I am going to put you under pressure now. I know we have some questions from the panel. I know if we don't get to all of them, my panel guests, I will ask you kindly that we answer them offline and that we share them out, send them out via email to the audience. But Ruby, let me hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Monique. Okay, the first question here is, any advice regarding challenging upwards regarding EDI and affecting change when there is not much buy-in at senior levels?
Salma, can I ask you that question? Only because I know it's a conversation we've had many a time.
Yeah, so I'm a real believer that you've got to find where your allies are, and I think start having the conversations there to build momentum and multiple voices saying the right things. I think using data and insight in terms of lived experience and voice is really powerful. One of the things that we've done in our board over the last 5 years that I've been here is we've invited staff from staff networks to come and talk to us about their lived experience, usually at a time when we're also looking at data. So that the data critics actually hear firsthand, and that's incredibly powerful. We hear what's working well, but we also hear some home truths about what's happening in the organisation, incredibly powerful. I think it's really important to use the data and the insight together, is what I'd say to you, but do it with your allies. I think it's everybody's business. So it's finding a way of either having an individual conversation and then building on that and building from there. Because I think if we go in all guns ablaze, what we do is we switch off the people that we really want to connect with and get them on board with it. Having said that, I would go back to saying that in 2023, boards and leadership at every level is accountable, I think, to ensure that the NHS is a great place to work for everybody and that they do belong. So we've got to keep reinforcing that message as well. The other thing I would say is that we're part of the problem, we're also part of the solution. It's something I learned very early on in my career, that I could either sit and moan about it or do something about it. I think join your staff networks. I think they're a great way now in organisations are recognising in NHS organisations particularly that actually through the networks, we spot talent, opportunities are there to influence change and to get involved in the governance and to affect change through that in a positive way is also something that I think most leaders would welcome in organisations now.
Thank you, Salma.
So the next question is, how do you manage the tensions between bravery and being made the problem?
Big question. Alison, can I come to you on that?
Oh, I've got so much experience of this. The problematizers, don't they? We're the problem. And I think that that's about you being really honest and reflect that back. So I have worked in environments where, because people don't like what I'm saying, if something goes wrong, I get exposed. You know, these things happen, we make mistakes. You feel, oh, I'm getting thrown under the bus here. And that's when they problematise you. Well, they've already problematized you and they're using the fact that you're a problem to exit you. So I have been there, I've got that T-shirt, but I am winning. So they didn't beat me, I beat them. And the way that you do it is by being really clear about what is happening. I'm feeling this. I'm asking this question of you because I think that this is what you're guilty of. What do you say to that? And everyone goes, oh, no, that's not me. Oh, no. And then they back off. So you have to be really clear about what's happening. Sometimes you have to talk it through because, you know, I lived in a domestic violence situation for 10 years. It took me 10 years to realise I was a domestic violence victim. You know, we do take a time to work out what's actually happening to us. So talk to the right people who you trust so that you can have that narrative and then reflect that back. You did this is how it made me feel. I'm linking it back to that thing that I said to you 6 months ago. I think this is your revenge, or I think that you've problematized me and that you're looking to exit me. I mean, maybe I'm just, making that up, but that's how it feels to me. And I have to say, I've never been exited, never. So it works. But you have to be really brave to have those conversations because, and obviously I'm super brave because I don't care. I don't care if people want to sack me. I've already gone way, way, way before that because that's not a safe environment for me to exist in. My mental health can't exist in that situation. So I've sniffed that out way before and I've gone. So I don't care about people who don't care about me. And if I work in an organisation that has no respect for me, my safety, my values, goodbye.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you. Ruby.
Okay, this is a scenario question. So,
okay.
A recent image of West Midlands Ambulance Trust senior leads have all been white male. What would you say if you were invited to the next board meeting to kind of encourage that increase in representation?
Sue, could I come to you on that one?
I'm slightly chuckling. I've been in that experience whereby, you know, the photo's gone out. And so one of the things for me is getting people into either one-on-one or one-on-two conversations. So not the public name and shame. All right. So then it is the piece for me is the conversation, particularly to the comms person. And it's one of those, what was in your head when you put that out? Because as a woman or as an ethnic minority and as somebody who knows that we've got some concerns in terms of, equality, diversity, inclusion, how do you think I feel when so I make it about me. So I'm not going to let them get into an intellectual place, but so I do this. So what do you think somebody like me would feel when I see that? What was in your head? And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's like, they didn't see it, of course. Didn't see it. And I'm going, not good enough. So what we're going to do about it? So it's not okay just to leave it. Oh, it's gone out there and we'll think about it the next time. It's what we're going to do about it. So it's that holding people to account. So showing them, highlighting is one of those things that I do. And then it's but what we're going to do about it. So not that this doesn't happen again, in other situations, but this particular incident. So I don't allow people to get away with this particular incident either. Mm-hmm. And people wriggle, and it's like, well, it's a particular demographic, and we thought, and it's so bring it back to feelings. So that's my approach. Call it out. Timely manner. Don't let these things pass a week. Call it out there and then, but in a small environment. And then the big piece for me is then, so when we're then next at the board meeting or the whatever meeting, are you going to feed back on that, or do you want me to bring it up? And of course, they want to own it then. Yeah.
I really appreciate the practicality. So I think the advice you're giving here as a panel, you're giving a clear statement of this is what you need to do, but you're also actually breaking it down very clearly for our audience about how you do that. And I think that's something that comes back to that comment again about inclusive leadership, about challenge, about speaking up. I love that you're all sharing how you do it. I love what you were sharing, Mahmud, about, this is how I work behind the scenes to weave things in before we get to the boardroom. This is how I bring that agitating challenge. So brilliant, Sue, what you just shared there. This recording will be so powerful for people. This is like an online mentoring and coaching and sponsorship session all wrapped in one. It really is. Ruby, I can squeeze one more really quick question in if you've got one. If it's not quick, be honest with me and we'll move to wrap up.
I have got one. There are loads, but as Monique said, we'll be answering some of those if we can after the session. How do you deal with rejection? That's the question.
That's the question. Okay. Can I be cheeky and take that question? Because I think there's something here about, I would say to you, what's the context of the rejection with my first thing? But one thing I would say as well, who and what is the rejection coming from? Okay. Because if the rejection is coming from a valid and credible source, if it's a job rejection and the feedback that you receive is constructive and clear and it's accurate, you learn from that, you take it in, you listen to what it is and you move on. If that rejection is coming from someone who is not a credible source, if that rejection is coming from someone who is not a great leader, not someone you take advice from, brush it off your shoulder and move on. And I really mean that. Because that's why I took exactly, Alison, it's their loss. And that's why we speak about having the strength of your network. Salma spoke about that. Having people that you can go to, who know you, who know what you're great at. You need that because career progression is tough. Career progression when you're in a minoritized environment is even tougher. Career progression to get to the top is extremely lonely at times. I'm not saying that to put you off. I'm saying that because it's the reality. And that's why we talk about your support, but get used. You see, when you shine, there are people who don't want to see you win. So there'll be critics, there'll be rejection, there'll be people coming for you. There'll be people like Alison said, trying to throw you under a bus. It happens. You have to recognize who's actually for me and whose opinion matters in those situations to be able to rebuild and shake yourself off. Okay, so I hope I've answered that for you. I have now given myself 2 minutes to try and wrap this up. Okay. So before I do anything else, absolute massive thank you to you, my panel guests, to Ruby and Millie, supporting me with the session as well. I always say it here, but the honesty today has been a different level of honesty today. It's been extremely powerful and extremely insightful, but very practical too. For those in the chat who are saying, you know, where was these? I haven't seen them before. Please share. Please share. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please share this with your colleagues. Ruby, if we could come to the slides, I will then try and weave us through what I want to say here about joining the movement. You join the movement by joining the sessions, by sharing them with somebody else, by going onto our YouTube channel and having a look at the sessions we've done before. But remember, I said to you at the beginning, your takeaway action today. Great, you've been inspired. Great, you feel motivated. Wonderful. And thank you for everyone thanking us in the chat. But for me, I don't want you to go back to your desk and next week you forget all about this. Okay, so I'm asking you today to make a commitment. What are you going to start, stop, or continue doing to help turn the dial now? You've received lots of practical advice today. You've heard lots of inspiring stories and journeys. We can all do something to help turn the dial now. Remember, hashtag it's everyone's business. So share it with me if you want to. Share it in the chat. We'll be sending an email out. Reply back to that email and let us know. Let us know on social media if you feel comfortable. What are you going to do to start, stop, or continue to help turn in the dial now? Ruby, shall we click on? So coming up next, very quickly to tell you, if you do subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you don't have to subscribe to it, you can just go and have a look as well. That's where we put all the recordings from our webinar sessions, from our interviews. Thank you, Millie, for putting that in the chat. We've got an In Conversation with coming up with Taps Metamachani. If you listen to our very first webinar, the Midlands session, Taps was amazing on there. I have a 45-minute conversation, I think, with him. You can listen to that recording soon. Embracing Equity in the Boardroom, we're doing a special edition webinar next month as part of International Women's Month. We'll really be talking about the dynamic of women in the boardroom as well. And then we are launching a podcast because you've just heard from a great panel, but I think you'll all know that you want to dig in more. You want to hear more from these leaders. You want to really hear more about their views and their journey. And we've decided to start a podcast so we can do longer interviews with some of our leaders, and I'll be inviting all of our panel guests to join me on one of those podcast episodes. So look out for that. And if we could just click on one more, Ruby. If you do want to post, and as I said, if you do want to connect with us, hashtag We Are Brave is what we are using at the moment. I believe I am on 431 now. So I am going to just say a very big thank you to everybody who joined us today. As I said, a massive thank you to our panel guests as well. And just to say that we will see you soon. We'll see you very soon. So I hope you'll all join us for the next Bravery in the Boardroom. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, my panel guests, you can leave us now. I will talk to you in our little WhatsApp group and I will close the meeting now. So I just asked Millie if you could close the meeting for us. That would be wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.